Welcome, Catherine. We've got Catherine Bennell-Peake, who's an Australian astronaut trainee at the European Space Agency and has been with the Australian Space Agency. I'm Dr. Jeff Ayton, Chief Medical Officer of the Australian Antarctic Division, and we're having a conversation about Catherine's experience as an astronaut trainee.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Jeff. Excited to speak with you and to be speaking with those of your colleagues that will go to Antarctica. How exciting.
Yeah. So, Catherine, how did you get to where you are? How did you always want to be an astronaut?
Yeah, absolutely. Being here, training to be an astronaut is the culmination of a lifelong dream, but also, the start of a journey to hopefully having far more activities in human spaceflight for Australia. For me as a kid, when I was young, I was really excited by the world around me. I wanted to know how things worked, why they were the way they are. And I particularly loved looking at the night sky. And when I realized, stars weren't just little pinpricks of light, but were entire worlds. As a child, that innate curiosity meant that I wanted to explore them. I wanted to understand them better. And that dream evolved as I grew up, of course, but I was stubborn enough to never let go. And I wanted to be part of the space endeavor and space exploration. But when I was young, Australia didn't even have a space agency. We had activities in space, sure, but I wanted to be involved in developing new missions. So I went overseas after studying engineering and after studying science in Australia and worked for about 10 years or so, developing space missions and systems across 6 different countries. And I loved it. I got to work on some of the coolest missions for science, like LISA Pathfinder for gravity waves, in space debris removal, in human space exploration for Artemis and the International Space Station. So incredible experiences. But, a few years ago, the Australian Space Agency was set up and the momentum in Australia was increasing to be involved in space. And I was hired back home to help the Australian Space Agency build capability in this country. So it's been a real honor doing that the last few years. I looked after the technology roadmaps activity, so what Australia should be doing over the next 10 years. I also developed the mission concept for the Moon to Mars Trailblazer rover, and more recently looked after access to space, so building the ability for Australia to be involved in the launch ecosystem and upstream satellite ecosystem. But to become an astronaut, well, that was another step altogether. I also have a British passport, so was eligible to apply for the European Space Agency selection a couple of years ago, and I did that privately and went through about a year and a half of an incredible selection process where they looked at psychology, our medical fitness, our skills, and other aspects. And I made it to the end, the top 25 finalists. And based on how that went, Australia and the European Space Agency agreed to have me trained here as Australia's first astronaut candidate. And that's like such an incredible honor. And I look forward for helping Australia, I hope, to accelerate its involvement in human spaceflight and exploration.
Excellent, and it's such a privilege to have your time here today. Can you tell us where you actually are now and what we can see in the background?
Yeah, so I'm training at the European Space Agency's European Astronaut Center, or EAC, which is in Cologne, Germany. And I'm here inside our training hall, which is full of lots of different space module mock-ups. And the one I'm inside now is the mock-up for Columbus, which is the European module on the space station. And we use this module to train different procedures and how to operate experiments and to learn about the systems. So yeah, here at the Astronaut Center in Europe, it's part of the global ecosystem around human spaceflight, particularly around the International Space Station and to the future looking to Artemis, which is lunar exploration. And each of the major ISS, International Space Station partner agencies have astronaut training for their own systems up there and also for their new astronauts. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking part in the astronaut basic training, which is meant to establish the first qualification for a career astronaut to be at the end of it, about a year or so from now. We get to be called astronauts, not astronaut candidates anymore, and we'll be eligible for selection for almost any kind of space mission you can imagine. But it's really about laying that foundation, those hard and soft skills you need to be part of a productive team in space.
Yeah, That's fantastic, and a great step forward for Australia. Can I just take you back to the selection process? Can you tell us and reflect on your process?
Absolutely. So I imagine that there's a lot of crossover in the type of skills and personality types that you're looking for in Antarctica and what space agencies are looking for in astronauts because of that similarity in the extremeness, the isolation, and the remoteness of the endeavor and the importance of performing in safety critical environments. So it started off with a standard application process where you submit, a private pilot's medical and some application documents. They cut from about 23,000 eligible applications down to about 1,300 based on the application documents. And what they were looking for in that cut down at the European Space Agency was that you had the right expertise. You had to have a minimum master's degree in a STEM field. They desired expeditionary experience in the field of over 6 weeks, environments like Antarctica. They were looking for operational capabilities and so on at that first cut. So then we went to Hamburg in the middle of the Corona pandemic to do a whole day of basically psychological and psychometric testing. And they weren't looking for geniuses. You didn't have to be top of any test, but they wanted you to not fail any test. So it's about being an all-rounder and having fewer weaknesses to work on. Through that, they cut it to about 300 to 400 and were invited to the European Astronaut Centre here in Cologne for a full day of psychology testing. And in that phase, they were looking to find the right kind of personality types that can live in a confined, isolated environments and get science done and get maintenance done in a safe way. They look for people that can take tough decisions, but also can be told what to do. So that balance of leadership and followership. So that means basically cutting out the extremes of any personality type. And here now at the Astronaut Centre, the other 5 ASCANs and I training did a personality test as part of it, and we're very similar, bizarrely. And then the stage after that was medical. And from medical, that was a full week in Toulouse, where they basically did every test you can do without a scalpel. So that was a great experience for knowing that you're donating your body in effect to science through this job. But that's important to ensure safety in space. It's probably not as extreme as Antarctica from a health management perspective. You can get down faster than you can get out of Antarctica. But in space, your body deteriorates quite a lot from the unique environment up there. Following that, we had technical interviews to look at our technical and operational competencies, which was a big panel interview, asking lots of what if and choose your own adventure questions in foreign languages out of the blue that you might have claimed on your CV, and all sorts of things like this. And and then finally, once all that was passed, the final stage took 25 people from across Europe or European Space Agency member nations. So that includes the UK. And they made a down selection to career astronauts and reserve astronauts. And the final interview was really about, can you justify human space flight? And do you really know what you're in for? Because it's not about the glory, it's a tough job. And it's important that people really understand that. So very rigorous selection process, but it's so important for teams in these basically extreme, isolated, confined environments to be set up to perform in the best way possible.
Yeah, there are so many similarities to the training and selection required here. With what you've seen so far, can you reflect on any similarities with your training?
Small teams in those environments are teams that are challenged, but they're also teams that can thrive if they're given the right ingredients to do so. That is appropriate selection, training, monitoring, and procedures. And so I'm sure that the Antarctic activities look at this from a very similar angle to space. And that's why there's such a strong collaboration between Antarctic activities worldwide and space agencies worldwide. For space in particular, there is an International Space Station human behavior and performance model that is the core that we trained around. And this particularly focuses at its core on building trust in teams, trust in each other's expertise, developing psychological safety, and measures to manage challenges. In small environments, small conflicts become big conflicts quickly. People really easily lose perspective, and people's personalities just seemingly change under those environments. So a huge part of our training is to expose ourselves as far as possible on Earth analogs and see how you perform and learn yourself how you perform, so you can manage that both individually and as a team. So even on the basic training, we've done a lot of theory around human behavior and performance, human factors and psychology. Last weekend, we did sea and ocean survival and firefighting and rescue from confined spaces. Coming up, we have winter survival. I'm sure that's much simpler than Antarctic survival, but it's a step in that direction. And other aspects that are really sought in a team environment for space is the ability to have both leadership and followership and situational leadership in your area of expertise.
We have a head office or a mission control in Kingston, in Hobart, Tasmania. Can you reflect on how safety and leadership followership works?
Yeah, absolutely. So in space, like it sounds like in Antarctica and with the Antarctic teams, there is a mission control. And various types of that. It's quite a complex web of different operational systems and different operational teams. But an astronaut and the astronaut team in space, in situ in the environment, is just the visible tip of the iceberg of a much larger team. There are situations in which the leader in space, there is a leader on the International Space Station at any time, a mission commander as well on the visiting vehicles, where they are able to take decisions. And there's other situations where ground should be taking the decisions. And interestingly, in mission control at NASA, the flight director is not able to be overruled by anybody, even politicians, during an operationally critical situation.
Excellent. So put yourself a couple of years down the track and you're in space. My understanding is that you can call for support. With your family, you've got access depending on where you are. Say if you were on the International Space Station, how is that managed, and how could you compare that with Antarctica?
Yeah, so on the International Space Station, the baseline is for long duration missions, so missions longer than a month. You have a weekly video conference with your family. You also have a fortnightly conference with a medical team and a psychologist. If you're particularly under stress, there's ways you can have additional meetings, but often, astronauts don't like to show weakness very much, so that they're not often requested, but it's also possible to have voice calls. There's a lot of work done on the ground to support astronauts with their families and remove life admin for them when they're preparing for a mission and flying a mission, which makes it far better. Space missions to the International Space Station are often around 6 months, so a bit shorter than overwintering in Antarctica. If something happens on the ground, they usually wouldn't bring you back for that, but if there's an emergency on the space station, you can get out of the space station into ground very, very quickly within a matter of a few hours, most likely up to a day before you're picked up. So in medical emergencies and so on, you can come down, but you are still isolated and confined, particularly. On the space station, there's a cupola, which is kind of a big surround window box, which looks down at the Earth. And a lot of astronauts like to go there to relax and get a sense of distance and size and perspective. And they can look down on a large area of the world. And it's like going outdoors in a way. It really calms you down.
I'm not sure if you're aware that Sir Douglas Mawson, he led the Australasian Antarctic expedition in 1911 to 1914. And in 1912, Sir Douglas Mawson said, outside, one is in touch with the sternest of nature. One might be a lone soul standing in Precambrian times or on Mars. All is hard in the durest. Have you got any thoughts about Sir Douglas Mawson in 1911 recognising that Antarctica has similarities to being on Mars, all hard in the durest and desolation?
Yeah, I love that. I love that quote. Amazing. Yeah, I absolutely see what he means. It's a frontier. It's exploration. It's scientific. It's in many ways making new discoveries, and you're out there in the environment. There's a sense of awe in exploration, in being in such a situation. And there's also a sense of promise and discovery.
If you were to give the next generation of Antarctic expeditioners or astronauts, or this current the current expeditioners, some advice, what would you say to them?
I'd say for those that are interested in being Antarctic expeditioners or astronauts, go for it. It's absolutely fantastic, and you work with people that are united with common goals and interests for exploration and science, and being in these remote extreme environments, that it's absolutely possible to do these things in a very meaningful way as an Australian, and that people have got to do these jobs. They're important, and if you'd like to do it, it might as well be you if you put in the effort and have all the ingredients in place. For those about to embark, I wish you well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.